you to pull in close. We need some 40 mic in here right now.
All clear.
Japan attacks South Korea. Samsung, LG and SK Hynix are affected by this attack. South Korea is the largest supplier of electronic equipment in the world. In 2018, Samsung, LG and SK Hynix supplied more than 60% of memory components and over 90% OLED screen worldwide. Tighter restrictions imposed by Japan on the export of 3 essential materials for smartphone screens and chips could hit tech giants such as Samsung, LG and SK Hynix. Japan is supplying to South Korea many raw materials required for high-quality semiconductors and components. Now Japan has removed it from its whitelist of trading partners. To obtain the stock of materials needed, the South Korean firm is subject to a long verification procedure. The trade war between Japan and South Korea challenges the global economy. It also represents a real threat to regional security. So where are we today after the start of tensions? South Korea files a complaint with the WTO against Japan. It is the last act of an economic war that has been raging since July. This conflict poisons almost all areas of cooperation between the two countries. Before continuing, I will explain to you a bit about the history of the roots of the current antagonism between South Korea and Japan. Between 1910 and 1945, South Korea was a Japanese colony. A painful period for the local population: poverty, Japanization of all spheres of activity, sexual slavery or forced labor. Everything changes after the defeat of Japan at the end of the Second World War. A first step towards reconciliation was taken in 1965. The two countries signed an agreement according to which Japan must pay $800 million in the form of aid close to South Korea. Part of this sum is intended for the compensation of wartime workers. Diplomatic relations are restored. Cooperation is gradually strengthening. Bilateral damage was dealt a heavy blow in late 2018, early 2019. The South Korean Supreme Court orders 3 Japanese companies to compensate the families of Koreans subjected to forced labor during colonization. Japan, for its part, categorically refuses to comply with this decision and believes that all disputes related to the past had already been settled by the 1965 treaty. The trade war between China and the United States is not the only one that has rocked the world economy. Another trade dispute has been on fire for several months. The two countries, Japan and South Korea, have imposed trade restrictions on themselves. Japan no longer has South Korea in its list of trusted trading partners. The same goes for Korea, which has made Japan its #1 economic enemy because Japan has started to remove South Korea from the list of partners. The consequences are quickly felt: slower growth, dropping economic activity in several sectors. Trade is not the only one affected. Military cooperation between the two neighbors is also affected. The trade war between Japan and South Korea. On September 16th, South Korea filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization against the Japanese authorities. According to the government of the South Koreans, Japan has violated the principles of the WTO by imposing two strands of economic restrictions. The first is announced on July 4, 2019. Japan blocks export of 3 necessary chemical compounds to manufacture of semiconductors and screens. In August 2019, second act of the Japanese economic embargo. Nearly 1,200 materials-produced equipment can no longer be exported to Korea without special authorization from Tokyo. In September 2019, the South Korean authorities raised Japan from their list of preferential trading partners. It is now part of a well-created category exclusively for Tokyo. In practice, this act controls trade with Japan. Another measure targeting Japan in the boycott of Japanese products. Launched in July 2019 by the South Korean population. This popular initiative has spread at a surprising speed. Beer, cosmetic and car cigarettes. All that carry the label, "Made in Japan," is mostly withdrawn from sale. This economic showdown is in fact a consequence of the South Korean court decision, which quickly turned into a diplomatic scandal and once again recalled a painful colonial past. In October 2018, the South Korean Supreme Court files a complaint with the Japanese steel plant Nippon Steel to compensate the families of 4 South Korean victims of exploitation during the war. Another complaint, this time it is Mitsubishi, which is summoned to pay damages and interest to the 28 families of the Koreans having undergone forced labor. The other case that made noise is that of sanctions against the Japanese company Nachi Surgical Sure. In January 2019, the Supreme Court ordered him to compensate 17 South Korean women who had been forced to work during the war. Nearly 70 other Japanese companies are still in South Korean courts. Japan does not even want to hear about it for itself. All the disputes linked to the past have long been resolved by the bilateral treaty of 1965. Much less visible to media radars than the trade war between China and the United States. The conflict between South Korea and Japan also has an impact on world markets, especially if tensions continue to worsen. South Korea is the world's largest supplier of electronic equipment. In 2019, Korean companies provided more than 60% of memory components and over 90% OLED screen worldwide. Tighter restrictions imposed by Japan on the export of 3 essential materials for smartphone screens and chips could hit tech giants such as Samsung, LG and SK Hynix. Japan supplies many raw materials to South Korea, necessary for high-quality semiconductors and components. Japan has now removed it from its whitelist of trading partners. To obtain the stock of necessary materials, the South Korean firm is subjected to a long verification procedure of 90 days. The technology giant, Samsung, is already ready to be delivered by China instead of Japan so as not to have a long verification procedure with Japan. Also, Sinopec, a company from South Korea, managed to develop the necessary high-quality raw materials used for volume and power buttons on smartphones. The necessary high-quality raw materials produced by South Korea have been approved for localization and have even started to be supplied to LG and Samsung. Unfortunately for the Japanese, the Koreans now have the solutions to survive without Japanese products, and the attack on Japan has no effect on South Korea anymore. The Korean government is heavily spending $1 trillion support budget to develop raw materials for the entire global electronics industry. Thanks for watching this video and subscribe if you liked it. Have a good day, everyone.